So where are you located?
Oh, you're asking me? So right now I'm located in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, okay. So you're 3 hours earlier.
Yeah, just a little bit earlier. I know it's a little bit later for y'all.
Wow, we appreciate your time
Oh
doing
yeah,
this.
it is my pleasure. Thanks so much for the invitation. I'm very happy to chat with folks. I think we'll give it like another 2 or 3 minutes or so, and then I'll just start rolling and going over
I
things.
just hope they didn't go into the other room, you know?
Yeah, if you want to check, I mean, feel free if you want to open up the other room just to see if people are there. If that's the case, I can totally switch it up and go to that room instead if it works for everybody.
All right, let me just say, hopefully nobody's, let me see. Oh, it says leave and start. So,
Yeah,
can I
if you leave
leave and,
if you leave the meeting, it's not going to end it for everybody. So yeah, feel free to just come back in when you're ready.
okay. You know what? I'd say let's just start and we'll, if anybody jumps in.
Yeah, that sounds like a
I
plan.
mean, I
That's
could send around another email, but I think I sent around enough.
That's totally fine.
Um,
Hillary, I can take it from here, and then if you need to reach out to anybody, send any emails, whatever, that's totally fine. I'll just keep doing my presentation until I hear
Perfect.
otherwise.
Thank you. Before we start, let me just welcome everyone to We Are Endurance webinar series. This is the way we usually kick off our webinars, and I'm really happy to have Dylan Mead with us. He's from Chat. He's from Ride with GPS. And Dylan, I'm going to let you take it away and, show us what this app is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody. Um, And so for those who do not know, Ride with GPS is a bicycle navigation app and website. And we offer a variety of different account types, based on your level of commitment and what you want to do with our service. You can have it as a free account. Creating an account in Ride with GPS is absolutely free, but we do have various paid subscription tiers based on what you want to do. And during my presentation, I'll do my very best to distinguish sort of what things are available with a free account versus which ones are available with paid accounts, and we'll sort of work our way through there. And then just sort of another side note here is Ride with GPS hosts the largest bicycle route library in the entire world. So it's a great resource for you to use to find your next adventure and also ensure that you don't get lost while you're actually out there doing it. The little anecdote I always share when I talk about Ride with GPS in our service is based on my own personal experience. I for a very long time was heavy into cycling and really wanted to go out and explore new places, do new things. The problem for me is that my sense of direction is absolutely horrendous. I can't follow directions. I can't read a map very well. So like the anxiety of thinking about going out and doing something cool usually would keep me kind of glued to the couch just because I was afraid to get lost. And sort of that was my introduction to Ride with GPS, realizing that I don't need to do it all myself and that there are apps out there like Ride with GPS. There are websites that allow me to help plan and navigate routes so I sort of can just focus on having the good time doing the training without having to worry about getting lost during the process. So I'm going to start out my chat today by first covering um, some of the basics of our app, which really is sort of the primary and first and foremost way people get introduced to our service. And then after I do a little bit of chatting about what the app, what can be done with it, I'll transition over to talking about the website a little bit and a little bit of how that's different than the app and what you can do on that service versus the other. So to do this, I'm going to share my phone screen over. Give me 1 minute and I will get that rolling. Oh, the other thing I was going to say that I always forget when I do one of these meetings is I've sort of baked in time at the very end for us to ask any questions that might come up. But if any questions come up while I'm chatting, feel free to unmute yourself, wave your hands around, ask me. I'm happy to stop right then and there and ask it. Otherwise, just be aware that we'll have time at the very end to cover anything that sort of pops up. So the screen that I'm sharing over right now is the default landing page of our app. Whenever you log into the app, this is the first page that you're going to see. I won't talk too much about this right now, but the important things to call out is you will see recent activity of yours shown sort of at the main part of the screen here. These are all recent rides that I've done, so ride recordings that I have finished and saved to my account. You'll also see some routes that I've planned sort of recently while I was playing around with the app or on the website. I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of the differences between each of those and how to plan routes of your own in a little bit. But the first thing is that I wanted to just mention is this is what the app home screen looks like, just to get you a little familiar with it. So the first thing that we're going to do is talk about how to find existing bicycle routes in an area near you. And how we'll do that is if you look at the bottom of my screen, there is a little explore icon, which I'm going to tap. And now we're taken to the Explorer screen, which is as you can see, a map view of the Portland area, which is where I am based currently. When you open this in your own app, it's going to default to either your home location if you've given us one, or we're going to sort of source your general location based on your network service provider, and open up the map based over that location for you. So right now we're looking at this map, and you might notice that there are a whole bunch of squiggly red lines all throughout the map here, and there are also some of these green little icons peppered. Those green icons that we're seeing are the start points for existing routes that run through this particular area. The red lines that we're seeing are the route lines that these routes actually follow through. You might notice that some of these green dots have a number on them, and that's just letting you know that there are a variety of different routes that have a similar start point through that area. And if you start to zoom in a little bit, you can see those start icons start to splinter out to give you a better idea of where specifically that route starts. So let me pan out a little bit. So right now, the Explore feature is searching for all of the routes that we have available on our service that run through this particular area. But for the purposes of searching, you're probably going to want to get a little bit more specific with the criteria by which we're looking for existing routes for you. I'll talk a little bit about those filters in a second, but just in this general overview of the Explore feature, if you simply tap on the route line for one of the routes that looks interesting running through this area, maybe there's a particular road that you want to ride on, something like that. You tap that red route line, it's going to pull up a tiny little preview of what that route actually is going to look like. You'll get a little elevation profile. You'll also see some metrics displayed on the screen. So if I'm using this one as an example, this route is called the Sabi Shootout. It is about 53.8 miles. There's about 2,000 feet of elevation gain, and this is a primarily or not all paved route. So when I'm riding this, I'm going to be on pavement the entire time. So that little route preview is just sort of a nice way to get a little bit more information about one of the routes that you're seeing here on the screen. I'm going to collapse this by just dragging that gray bar down to the bottom. And I'm taking back to that main map screen here. One of the cool things about Explore is that if you are interested in riding in an area that you are not currently located in, like let's say, for example, right now I'm in Portland, Oregon, but if I pan my map over into the gorge here, Columbia Gorge, and say, I would like to look for existing routes in Carson. Now that I've panned my map over, towards the bottom of the screen, you can see there is a little search this area button. And when I tap that, we are now searching for all of the existing routes that run through Carson specifically. So you can continue to pan your map over until you see the location that you want to use for your search, and then you can hit that little search this area button and we'll start to fetch routes based on that particular geographic area that we're looking at. But for right now, let me head back to Portland and zoom in a little bit. One thing you might actually notice as we're looking at Explorer is there's a little blue dot sitting there in the middle of the map screen. That blue dot is my current location on this map, just to help give me an idea of where I am in relation to the routes that I plan on doing. I'm going to tap search this area again. Okay, so now we have a bunch of routes on this page, but we want to be a little bit more specific about what we're searching for and what we're going to ultimately end up riding. And that's where all of the different search filters come into play here. If you look towards the top of my Explore screen, you can see that there are 4 different boxes listed. There is one that says length, there's one that says elevation, surfaces, and route type. The 4 things listed there are the different search filters you can enable based on the type of routing you plan to do. So I'll walk you through setting some of those filters just to give you an idea of how our service will start to filter out the routes that we return to you based on the criteria you're looking for. I think this is also particularly useful if you are looking for training rides to do. I personally am not a competitive cyclist. This year was the first time I'd ever participated in an actual bicycle race. And because this was my first time, I was very concerned about training aspects and making sure that I was climbing a decent amount, making sure that I was out for a decent amount of time. And I use the Explorer feature extensively to find routes locally that would actually help with my training program as I was getting ready for this race. So one of the first filters that I turn on always is length. So if I tap that length filter, this gives you a slider option, which allows you to set the sort of the break between, where's the low point and where's the high point of the mileage that I want to do. So let's say I'm going out for a training ride. I'm going to set the low end of my slider to, let's say 40 miles. And let's set the high end of my filter to, let's say 60 miles. Okay. Once I've selected my range, I just tap where it says save. And as you can see, once I tap that save button, the Explorer feature is now fetching routes that are meeting the criteria that I plugged in here. So all of the routes shown on screen are between 40 and 60 miles. The next thing, elevation. This is another really important factor to put in when you're looking for existing routes, specifically with training in mind, because a 40 to 60 mile route might not be that bad if you're on a relatively flat road. But if you're starting to change with that, mess with elevation a little bit, then you start to make that 40 to 60 mile ride or route a little bit tougher. So now I'm going to tap elevation. I'm going to select my slider range. I'll set the low end at 2,000 feet of elevation. And I'm going to set the high end at, let's say, 7,000 feet of elevation. That's a pretty big range, but I think it's going to pull back a lot of good routes that are going to match that criteria. I'm going to tap save. Okay, it's got an even more finite. Services is a great one. I don't know how y'all feel. When I look for existing routes in an area, I typically like to look for a good mix of paved and unpaved. I have a gravel bike that can sort of handle these types of things, but the services filter is really helpful. Let's say you have a road bike or a time trial bike, for example, something with tinier tires that probably isn't going to fare as well on gravel, or maybe you just don't want to deal with gravel. If you tap the paved or mostly paved option, and as you can see, you can select multiple different surface filters at the same time if you like. Once those filters are set, tap save. And we'll search again. The last filter that we have here is route type. Another one that I find very useful. If you tap route type, you'll see that there are 3 different route structures to choose from. We have a loop route, which is my personal favorite. That way you're sort of covering new ground the entire time. You're not going over the same spot too many times. I think it's a nice way to keep things fresh and interesting during a long ride. but you also have the option to do an out and back, which is point A to point B, back to point A, or a point-to-point route, which is from point A to point B. So I'm going to select loop and save. All right. So these are all of the routes matching that criteria shown on the map screen here. I'm going to tap one of these routes to see just a little bit more information about it. Okay, let's say that this route is appealing to me. It's a route that I probably want to use later on. I'm going to tap that route to see it in full view. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but the way in Ride with GPS that we say, hey, this route looks cool, I want to save it for later so I can easily find it when I'm actually ready to start navigating this route. At the bottom of the screen, there is a little save button. And if you tap that save button, it gives you two different options. One is download for offline. I'll talk a little bit about what that is in just a minute. But then we also have the option that says save to pinned, which is that's the one that I'm going to select. When you pin a route in Ride with GPS, it takes that route and it adds it to the pinned tab of your mobile route library and web-based route library, mainly so that you can find it quickly and easily later on. I will run through in a little bit where to find your pinned routes and where to look for your routes in general in the app. But I just wanted to walk you through the process of searching for an existing route, saying, hey, that route looks good, and saving it to your account so you can find it quickly and easily later on. All right, let me hit that back button. Okay. One last thing that I will show you, which I think is a very useful tool. Let me reset some of these filters here. Okay, so right now I don't have any filters set or enabled. And remember that search this area button that I showed you earlier, where you can pan the map over and then search the specific area once you get there. One other really cool feature is, let's say you don't necessarily want to search, like pan to search a really big, huge area, but let's say instead you want to search for routes that use a very, very specific road, for example. So this is actually, Forest Park is a really, really great local area to ride for people who like riding gravel. It's unpaved, it's in the forest, it's really, really close to Portland, so you can get there relatively quickly. But there is a really cool road called, let's see, the Northwest Forest Road 10 here. So let's say I want to look for existing routes that run through this specific road. If I long press on that road, we do something called inspect. And what that does is it pulls up a list of existing routes that run through the specific point at which you tapped. So if there's a really, really cool road that you want to make sure is on a route that you pull up here, doing an inspect function is a great way to do that. The one thing I'll say about the inspect function I just showed you is that is only available with a paid subscription. So you need to either have basic or premium to get that. But the explore feature in general that we've been talking about this entire time, that is available with a starter or a free subscription. So you can do that. You can look for existing routes without having to spend any money whatsoever. All right, so that's our explore feature. I'm going to move away from that for a minute. The next thing I want to talk about is our ride and route library in the mobile app. So we're going to talk about where to find that and how to actually use it, how to look through it, and what you can expect with all that. So if you're looking at the bottom of my screen, there's a little library button. So I'm going to tap that. And that takes us to our mobile route library. So there's a whole bunch of information contained here. If you look at the very top of the screen, you'll notice that there are 4 different tabs listed. There is a rides tab, a routes tab, a pin tab, and an offline tab. I'm going to talk about each one of these and what they mean, what you can expect here. So rides, I briefly mentioned this earlier, but a ride is just a recording of your activity. A ride does not have a cue sheet, a list of turn-by-turn directions, and therefore is not navigable. When you see a ride on your account, it's just a record of what you did, how far you went, how fast you did it, all that type of stuff. So if I look at this recent route or recent ride that I recorded and tap to see it in full view, you'll see that there's a little elevation profile showing you, the general elevation gain and loss for this route. You'll see the mileage listed there, how many feet of elevation gain I had, and about how long it took me. If I drag this little gray bar on the screen up, I have a whole list of expanded metrics here. So if I wanted to get a little bit more information about the ride recording itself, like my max speed, for example, don't judge me. I did this on a cargo bike that was fully loaded, so I was moving a little slower than normal. But there's a whole bunch of interesting details you can take a look through here. One thing, I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but one sort of handy feature about Ride with GPS is something called segments. I tap segments. There are, our users have gone through and created a variety of different segments that run through all of Portland, and this is available in any area that you end up riding in. But let's say there's a really popular stretch of road, between Stark Avenue and Powell Boulevard, where it's an area that you ride through relatively frequently, and every time you ride through those specific areas, like let's say the segment is between Stark Avenue and Powell Boulevard. Anytime you ride through there, our app will track your progress and compare your efforts against everybody else who's ridden that specific segment. Or if you don't want to be compared to everybody else, you can compare each of your efforts on this particular segment to one another. I'll include information in this in my follow-up email, but it's a great way to see if you are getting faster at a particular segment. It's a great way for you to sort of time yourself and gauge the effort of one day with the next day to see if you're sort of improving and push the pace a little bit, that type of thing. Okay, so that sort of covers our rides page. Anytime you have a recording, you finish and save it, your ride's going to populate here and show you. Let's go to the routes tab. So the routes tab is going to show you every route that you personally have created on your Ride with GPS account. Obviously, I have a lot of different routes because I basically am creating routes for myself all day long and for other people. So, if I wasn't scrolling through here too quickly, you'd see that there are a couple of London, England routes. I haven't been there. I'd love to go there at some point. I was helping somebody create a route in there earlier today, so that's why it shows. So the next thing, let's go to our pinned tab. So if you recall earlier, when I was looking through Mobile Explorer, I found that little Otto Miller route, and that was the route that I used to show you the example of how to pin. As you can see here, when I go to the pin tab of my mobile route library, that pinned route is listed right up at the very, very top of my screen. It's called Otto Miller. That way I can sort of find it quickly and easily when I'm actually ready to go out and navigate this. So just to sort of clarify that and bring it all home, when you find a route that's created by somebody else and you want to use that yourself for navigation later on, adding it to the pinned tab of your mobile route library is a great way to ensure that you can find that route later on when you're actually ready to navigate it. So the next thing on here is our offline tab. Before I go to my offline tab, I want to sort of show you how to download a route for offline use and explain what that actually does. So let me tap that Otto Miller route. And at the very bottom of the screen, there is that little save button, which we tapped earlier to pin. Now I also have the option to download for offline, which I'm going to select. And I should also mention, as I'm showing you this, that the ability to download a route for offline use is a paid feature, so you would need either a basic or premium subscription to access that feature. Hit that back button. Okay, now I'm going to go to my offline tab. Let's see here. As you can see, that Otto Miller route is currently downloading for offline use. So let's talk a little bit about what that actually means. When you download a route for offline use, what you're doing is you're taking that route itself, the route line, and some of the surrounding map tiles, and you are storing it on your phone locally. The reason this is something that you might want to do is when you download a route for offline use, that ensures that you will be able to access turn-by-turn voice navigation, see your location along that route in real time, regardless of your connection to a cell network or Wi-Fi. So if you're heading into an area that I'm actually from Long Island originally. I'm familiar with some of the riding around that area, but let's say, for example, you were going to be doing a mountain bike ride in the Pine Barrens, right? That area does not have a lot of good cell reception. It definitely doesn't have access to cell network or Wi-Fi rather. So if you download that route for offline use, that ensures that when you head into the forest, when you head away from civilization, that you're still going to be able to see where you are, find your way out, and navigate this existing route in there. The other, oh, is there a question? Go for it.
So does the other, when you pin a route, do you recommend doing this for all of your routes, like to do it offline so that just in case you don't have cell service?
I think that's a great way of putting it. You definitely don't need to always download a route for offline use to your phone before you head out and use it. We'll still source out like the connection to a cell network and Wi-Fi and provide turn-by-turn directions accordingly. But if you want to make absolutely sure that no matter what, you're going to have access to that route for navigation, then I would definitely suggest downloading it for offline use. In terms of like the amount of space a downloaded route takes up on your phone, it's relatively minimal. I've downloaded really long routes. I've downloaded very short routes. I've had upwards of 50 routes downloaded to my phone for offline use at any given time, and I've never run out of space. I've never had that be an issue. So there's really no downside to downloading them for offline use, but again, not something that you need to do. Always a great practice just for safety's sake to make sure that you have it. So with that said, and that actually segues great into the second advantage of using an offline route. When you download a route for offline use, you can put your phone in airplane mode, you can put your app in offline mode, and what that's going to do, like we'll use the example of airplane mode. When you put your phone in airplane mode, you are essentially stopping access between your phone and the outside world. You're preventing your phone from reaching out to try to connect to Wi-Fi, from reaching out to try to connect to a cell network. And instead, you're limiting the use of your phone to just what you already have downloaded on there. So when you download a route for offline use and you navigate it with your phone in airplane mode, you'll still be able to see your location. You'll still be able to get turn-by-turn directions, voice instruction, all that type of stuff. But the benefit is that because we're stopping your phone from attempting to reach out to cell network or Wi-Fi, we're drastically extending the battery life of your phone while you're using the app. The anecdote that I always give, I think Hillary might have heard me say this in our last meeting, but I do a lot of bike packing trips, trips where I put all my camping gear on my bike, I go into the woods for a couple of days, and when I download a route for offline use and navigate it with my phone in airplane mode, I can usually get about 15 hours of recording on a single battery charge, which is pretty significant. So yeah, downloading routes for offline use, navigating them in airplane mode, great way to make sure that you have all the things that you need to, and that the battery on your phone does not get drained out too quickly. Okay, so I've talked a lot about all of the potential, ways you can, find a route, save a route, find it later in your app, download it for offline use. I think the next thing that I want to talk about is recording a ride, and then we'll segue into what navigation actually looks like so you can have a sense of how that works. Okay, so if we're looking at my screen, at the very bottom middle, there is a little record button, and I'm going to tap that. And right now, just to sort of recap, when you're recording a ride, you're not navigating anything. All you're doing is just recording your actual activity itself. So right now I'm in the ride screen. If you look towards the bottom of my screen, you can see there's a little duration metric, which is showing you that there is an active recording running. So we're currently tracking what it is that I'm actually doing. If I were moving around right now, that little blue dot on the screen, which is my current location, would be moving along as well. As you sort of move along during a ride recording, a red line is going to appear behind you, just showing you where you have been. And your location will sort of continue to update accordingly as you move along here. Okay, somebody joining, let me let them in here. Awesome. Okay, so within the ride recording screen, if you take a look down at sort of towards the bottom of my screen, you can see that there are a variety of different metrics that are being displayed. I have one that say distance, speed, duration, elevation gain, average speed. These metrics are going to update in real time as well. So if, for example, you have your speed metric enabled, you're going to see your speed shown to you in real time as you actually ride along through here. There are two different pages of metrics. If I swipe to the right, I can see that there's another variety of metrics listed here. It's important to say that you can actually customize the metrics that are shown to you in your ride screen. And you can do that by long pressing any of the metrics that are currently shown here. So I'm going to long press where it says distance. I'll hold that down. And this is going to pull up a list of all of the available metrics you can choose from to have displayed during an active ride recording. So you can see there's a whole bunch of different things that you can choose from: moving time, duration, distance. I'll check speed. And you can see now I have speed shown 2 different times here, but all this is to say that there's a variety of different ways you can personalize your ride screen to reflect the metrics that matter most to you, and you'll be able to see them while you actually ride through. The next thing that I want to talk about is the different map types and overlays that we offer within the recording screen. And these map types and overlays I'll show you are going to be available for both route navigation as well as just simple ride recording too. Towards the lower left-hand corner of my map screen, there's a little white circle that looks like it has multiple layers of squares on there. The icon sort of looks like a graduation cap. If I tap that icon, it's going to pull up all of the different map options and map type overlays that we can enable. Hillary, are you having an okay time finding that? So if you're looking at the
Yeah, I don't see that. So I'm following along with you on mine, and I have metrics, elevation, cue sheet, and tools on the bottom.
so you might
I don't
be.
know.
Are you? So here, let me actually back up a little bit.
Why don't you have the same as
Yeah,
me?
is this kind of what it looks like for you?
For the record you're talking about, or
Yeah, so
I was,
I'm wondering if potentially you are not at the recording screen and you're someplace else. But here, let me head back to record and we'll see if we can get there.
I'm going to go back to home and then go to record.
Okay, go for it. Let me know when you're there and I'll sort of make sure that I'm doing this along with you.
Okay, I just went from home to record.
Okay.
And on my bottom, I mean, I do see a screen like this, auto paused, move to record. I see distance, speed, duration, distance
Okay.
left, and ETA. But
Okay.
then on the very bottom, where you have your record button and you only have metrics and tools, I also have elevation and cue sheet.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you're navigating a route, which is totally fine. Um, but that's like that elevation option is only going to appear when you're sort of actively navigating. I imagine you may have had a ride recording running from a previous session that just hasn't been finished yet. That's my
Mm,
guess as to why you're seeing this.
mm.
But in terms of what I'm referencing here, do you see that little white circle with the squares in it? It's like just above on my screen, it's just above where the speed metric is listed.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I do have that. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that's
Perfect.
what you're clicking on. Okay,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
got it.
It is kind of hard to see, so I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page.
Oh, I
And
got it.
at some point,
Okay.
we will talk about ending an active ride recording, so we'll get rid of that elevation and cue sheet sort of thing that you're seeing there. Okay, so if I tap my map overlay button, this shows you all of the different map overlays that you can enable in the app. If you're following along with me, I would definitely recommend enabling directional arrows. That's just if you have a route loaded in for navigation, which again, I'll run you through in a moment. Those directional arrows will appear on the route line itself to give you a sense of the directionality of the route. And while you're navigating, it's just one extra way for you to have a sense of where you're actually moving and where you're supposed to be going. Towards the bottom of my screen, there's a whole bunch of different map types listed in there. Which map type you use is entirely up to you and your own personal preference. For example, if I turn on satellite map style and then tap done, you can see that my ride recording screen actually looks like the view is of the neighborhood in which I am riding in, as it would exist in real life. I think that this is a useful feature. Personally, though, I find it a little difficult to use when recording ride or navigating just because you can't really see the contrast of the streets very well. I do think that it's just a useful tool to have, though. If I head back to my map overlays, I'm going to head back to Ride with GPS just because that's sort of the default that I normally use. I'm just bringing this up to show you that there are a whole bunch of different map styles you can use based on what your own personal preference is. So I want to show you one really cool feature, but before I do, I want you to look at this map and sort of memorize it a little bit. Right now, we're looking at a bunch of empty streets. We're seeing some street names and roads and all that type of stuff. What I'm going to do is turn on something called the heat map overlay. So I'm going to tap my overlay button, and I'm going to select global heat map. Okay, and now I'm going to tap done. And let's look at my map screen when we return to it. Boom, really busy looking, right? Where it used to be nice and clean, there is a whole bunch of these really dark red lines, dark red purple lines, and all that stuff. What the heat map overlay is a visual representation of where people are riding their bikes most frequently in a given area. We're creating the heat map overlay based on publicly recorded ride data. So anytime somebody records a ride publicly and saves it, that information is being added to our heat map overlay. And the reason I'm showing this to you is, if you're heading out for a ride recording and you're not really too concerned with navigating a route, you just want to go out and record your activity and you want to have a nice day on the bike. One thing that you can do is start to follow heat map signatures in the area just for fun. It's kind of like route planning on the fly because you can see where people are riding their bikes most frequently in that area. I've done this quite a few times, and I find that it's a really nice way to discover cool side streets that I otherwise would have completely ignored or not have known existed. And basically, the last thing I'll say about this is the deeper the color of red, or the deeper that purple color, the more frequently that area is being ridden. So like if I zoom in kind of closely here, this main street just off to the left of my blue dot has a really, really deep heat signature there. So that road is getting a lot more traffic than the road just underneath my blue dot, which is just a little bit lighter shade of that purple color. So I think this is a really cool, fun feature. I don't like having it turned on all the time because it can make your map look very busy, but just letting you know that it's there. Hillary, do you have another question?
Quick question. Okay, yeah. So is there a way to find out if there's a lot of vehicle traffic?
So that's a really good question, and I think the answer to that I will touch base on in a little bit when we talk about route planning. But basically, if you are seeing a real heavy heat signature, just in the overview of talking about the heat map, if you're seeing a heavy heat map signature, it's because people are riding their bikes on it most frequently. So it's a way for you to sort of anecdotally see, like, chances are this is probably going to be a cycling safe road because people are riding there most frequently. I'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, but one of the important things to say about routes that are created on our service, we don't moderate users' route creation, but when you create a route between point A and point B on our service, we are going to default to the roads that are safest for cycling in that area. And more specifically, what we take into account is, does this road get a lot of bicycle traffic? If yes, we're going to probably default to that road. If this road has a small shoulder and gets a lot of vehicle traffic, we're not going to default to that road. We're going to use some side streets instead. And we'll also, like, whenever possible, default to bikeways, greenways, bicycle paths, areas that are designated for cycling use over, like, cycling takes priority for us over any other routing type. So we want people to make sure that they're not going to be stuck on really, really busy roads or highways or that sort of thing when creating a route here.
Great, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so I'm going to
So when you're,
Oh,
so
yes.
quick question. So when
Yeah.
you're aggregating data,
Yes.
do you set a time limit on how far back you look into that data? So that, and do you take into account, say, detours, construction data, other things that can be, that might affect a route?
Yeah, so those are two absolutely wonderful questions. I'm going to address your first one first. Please don't let me forget about that second one because I really want to touch on it. So we actually currently don't have a time limit to the heat map signatures that you're seeing here, or to the aggregate data that we're seeing, but our heat map overlay is updated very, very frequently. So if if areas like are sort of continuing to get a decent amount of cycling traffic over and over and over again, those heat map signatures are still going to appear as like deeper and darker. But we do include historical like data as well. So let's say, for example, you're looking at you know, a logging road that the last time somebody rode was in 2018. That would still appear as a heat map signature. It might be a little bit lighter because it's not very recent, but it will still appear there. Does that answer your question? At least the first.
Yes, it does.
Okay. And then so the second question that you asked was about, you know, like really it sort of comes down to how frequently are we updating our base map information? You know, like if there's construction on a specific road, will that be reflected on our maps? If there's a bridge closed due to construction, are we going to show that here? So this is sort of a two-pronged answer, but we lease map data from two different places. We don't maintain it ourselves, but where we're taking that information from is Google and OpenStreetMaps. And I don't know if you're familiar with OpenStreetMaps, but what that actually is it's basically Wikipedia for bike nerds, right? Like Wikipedia relies on user-submitted changes and edits to make sure that the information shown there is as up-to-date as possible. And OSM maps sort of work the same way. We're relying on users to submit that data to make sure that everything is as up-to-date as possible. The good news about that, both Google and OSM have very, very active and vibrant like editors and contributors. So a lot of the times, the data that you see on the screen is as up-to-date as possible, just in terms of how frequently we update it. Google mapping data, we update nightly. So if there's a user submitted change or edit on a Google-based map, that'll be updated the next day when we turn everything back on. OSM-based maps take a little bit longer to update. I think that the current turnaround time is 2 weeks. So once somebody submits an edit to OSM, it'll appear on our mapping services within 2 weeks. So it's a very long way of saying that we have very, very up-to-date mapping data, the most up-to-date mapping data available. However, you're not going to know 100% what the status of a particular road or trail is until you're actually out there riding it. So while you can have a reasonable degree of faith that what you're seeing on Ride with GPS is what actually exists in the world, if there's any question or any doubt, you might want to just check briefly, you know, on a Google, like just Google the road in question that you're looking for to see if there are any recent closures. But from my own experience, I've never really had to do that. Most of what I see on our mapping service is exactly what you'd expect to see in real life. Okay.
One more question regarding the data.
Yes.
Do you record where accidents occur, or do you ask for that input?
So we don't. Oops, sorry. We don't like track traffic data ourselves. That would be more something that's done on, like, you know, Google mapping service where they're sort of updating traffic or accidents and that sort of thing in real time. So we don't have that information on our service. We don't track that. We don't have like a radar or a way to track that from our folks. But there are plenty of ways where you can call out, like if you're creating a route, for example, there are plenty of ways in which you can call out like a problematic intersection or an area at which you know that there's been sort of some sort of accident or, you know, some sort of obstacle that cyclists might want to avoid. Any questions about that?
No, thank you.
Okay, cool.
Is it am I on? Yeah, I'm on. Is it kind of like Waze where you get these, you know, everybody's sourcing information as they go?
So
okay.
Yeah, I mean it's similar. It's similar to Waze. I think the thing that's sort of important to call out from our end is, you know, the ability to submit. So anybody can submit edits to Google or to OSM, the two mapping services that we pull from. But that does take an extra step of sort of like, you know, going for your ride, and then maybe when you're done, going to Google, going to OSM, submitting those edits, having those edits set. Yeah, there like the good news is there are plenty of very, very nerdy bicyclists out there who are happy to keep that information updated. Luckily for us, that's how it always sort of works out. But no, you won't get any sort of immediate turnaround in terms of what you see on the road versus what appears on our mapping services. It does take a little bit of time for that to sort of come through. Okay, so here, let me stop my share for just a brief moment because I wanted to talk. Actually, sorry. Let's both go through how to end an active ride recording, because this is something that we're sort of trying to make a little bit more obvious to folks, but it's a question that comes up every once in a while worth touching on during this. So if you look at the bottom middle of my screen, there's that little white circle with a pause icon sitting in the middle of it. So how we end our ride is by tapping and long pressing that button. When you long press that button, a little option will pull up that gives you the ability to either resume ride or finish ride. Hillary, you doing all right? Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, I'm actually, I must have recorded something, but there's nothing here, but
Okay.
I'm going to just, how do you just,
How do you just delete it?
yeah,
Yeah, I'll show
yeah,
you.
okay, go ahead. I'm
So-
following.
No, you're doing great. So from the screen, we can either resume or finish ride. So let's tap finish ride. So when you tap finish ride, you're taken to our save form where you can give the ride a title if you want. You can give it a description. If you took photos along that ride recording, you can add those photos. One of the cool things about Ride with GPS is when you add photos to a route, or sorry, to a ride, and like photos that you took during that ride, when you save it, we're going to geotag those photos in the location that they were taken, which is sort of a nice way to, if you saw a cool viewpoint, you'd be able to see along the line itself where you actually took it, which is nice. But for the purposes of today, since we're just practicing and we're going to discard this recording, if you scroll down a tiny bit, you'll see the option to delete appear.
Oh.
This used to be a lot more front and center, but people kept accidentally deleting their ride recordings, so we had to hide it a little bit. So if you wanna just delete it, that's how you get the delete option. If you want to save it so that it appears in your ride library, you tap that save button at the bottom of the screen.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So let me stop my share for just a brief second. I want to transition into talking very quickly about navigation, how to start navigation session, and what you can expect during navigation. But there's one more feature I wanted to bring up briefly about ride recordings that I think might be useful for folks to know. We have a feature called live logging. And what that does is allow you, let's say you're going out for a ride recording or you're going out for a navigation session, but you want to broadcast your location so that somebody else can see where you are at all times. Typically, I'll see this, and I use this myself, where I'm going out for a ride and my partner wants to know where I am and just wants to make sure that I'm alive and well and actually continuing to ride my bike. When you share your live logging sessions over with someone else, the recipient, regardless of whether they have a Ride with GPS account or not, whether they're free or paid, doesn't matter, you can send your location and they'll be able to see you on a map and have your location updated in real time and continue to follow along as you go. So it's sort of just a nice little safety feature that you can have to let folks know where you're going and what you're doing. The specific steps to do this, I'll include in my follow-up email. So if you have any questions, you'll be able to see it. I just didn't want to go into it because it takes just a little bit of time to show. But yeah, the one last thing I will say about live logging, while it is a great feature, it does use a little bit more juice on your battery. So I would say save it for when you really, really need it. If you're going into areas without cell reception, be aware that it may not work that whole time. If we lose your location, we'll continue to try to update it as soon as we have cell network or Wi-Fi again. Alrighty, let me start navigation on a route. And then at the very end, we'll talk a little bit about route planning and what you can expect there. Just taking just a second for my screen to pop up here. Okay, so let me find a route that's close by. This is always kind of a tough thing to demo because I'm not actually riding my bike right now, unfortunately. So giving you sort of a play-by-play of what it really looks like in real time is a little tough, but let me give this to you as an example. So this route actually starts from my home, which is where I'm currently sitting here. And as I'm viewing the route in full view, you'll notice that there is a little navigate button in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. And before I get into this, navigation is sort of a big thing to mention, is a paid feature. So you need at least a basic subscription to access navigation, turn-by-turn voice instruction for an existing route. But if you have a basic or a premium subscription, you tap that navigate button. And that takes you to the ride screen, which you might recall, we just went over this a little bit ago. You've seen this before, except the difference is now I have my little blue dot on the screen. Above my blue dot is the start icon for the route itself. You can see that there is a blue route line shown on the screen with some directional arrows peppered throughout there. If I zoom out, I can see the route in its entirety, and this is a live recording. So if I actually started riding along and moving right now, the route line ahead of me will always remain blue, but the route that I have covered will appear as red behind me. That way you'll sort of always know what's still ahead to be done and what you've already done listed behind you. Towards the top of my screen here, you can see that there is a little queue notification. It says turn right onto Southeast Lincoln Street. So this is the next direction that I'm going to need to follow. And as I reach each one of these queues, each one of these directions, the next one is going to populate and display over the top of my screen. That way I'm sort of continually updated with the most recent queue that I need to do, the most recent direction that I need to follow, and that will continue to update as I actually go and ride this route. The other thing is, in addition to showing you the queue over the top of the screen, our app is also going to verbally announce it to you. So if you have a Bluetooth headphone in, or you just have the speaker of your phone turned up, you're going to hear the queues announced to you as well as you actually go through here. So I think everybody has their own preferences in terms of what navigation cues they want to hear versus which ones they don't. All of these things can be turned off or turned on depending on your own personal preference. I'll show you this sort of quickly, but you can do that by tapping the Tools button in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. When you tap Tools, you'll tap Settings. From the Settings menu, you go to Navigation. And the navigation screen is going to show you all of the different alert content that you're going to be getting during an active navigation session. You can turn all of these on or off depending on your own personal preference. I think Hillary, I might have mentioned this to you during our last call, but I have very poor hearing, so verbal directions really don't do much for me. So I'll typically turn those off just so I don't have to sort of continually hear those little updates as I go. But again, everybody has their own personal preference, stuff they like versus stuff that annoys them in terms of what you're hearing during navigation. And you can turn all of those on or off depending on what works best for you. Let me return to my navigation screen here. Go back to metrics. One of the other cool things about navigating routes in Ride with GPS is the elevation profile. At the bottom of my screen here, there's a little elevation button, and if I tap that, it shows the full elevation profile for the route I'm navigating. In the lower left-hand corner, you can just barely see my little blue dot there. That little blue dot will move along this elevation profile in real time, so I can sort of see when I'm approaching a really, really big climb and mentally prepare myself for what it is I'm about to actually do. All right. So now that I've sort of did the once over on how navigation sort of works in the app, let me go through and end my active recording because I don't want to save this. I don't want my phone continually beeping at me after this is all done. And again, how I do that is by long pressing that pause icon, finish ride, and I'm going to delete it. Okay. So let's transition into talking about route planning. I know we're sort of getting to the end of our hour here, and it's okay if we go over just a little bit, but I wanted to talk about route planning in the mobile app because I think this is sort of a nice, quick, and easy way to do it. How I access my mobile route planner is by tapping the More button in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Then I go over to Route Planner. And here we're again taken to a nice blank screen. Oops, Hillary, you follow me okay? You want me to head? Okay, got it. So we're taken to a nice blank map screen. And the first thing that we need to do in order to start planning our route is to pick a start location. There's two ways you can do that. You can tap on the map where you want that start location to go, and a little start location is added for you. One thing that I'll call out, in the lower left-hand corner of the map screen, just above where that little map overlay icon is, there's sort of a little curved back arrow, lower left-hand corner of the map screen. So you might not see this if you haven't actually made any edit yet, but that's the undo button. That will just undo the most recent edit that you've done.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So now that I've tapped here, added my start point, if I start to tap along the roads that I want to use, a route is going to be created each time I tap on that screen. So that's one way to create a route. You continue to sort of rinse and repeat those steps until you have one finished cohesive route. Another way, and I think this is where the mobile route planner really shines, is by tapping in that search location box up at the top of your screen. You'll see I have a recent search in here, but most of the time you're going to see either current location or home. So let's say you're not at your home location right now. Let's say you're at work and you need to plan a route to the top of a local mountain after work that you want to ride up. So if I tap in that search location box and select current location, that gives me the option to start route here, and the route planner focuses over my current location. If I tap that, a little start icon is added. Perfect. The next thing I want to do is pick my destination. If I go to the search location box at the top of the screen here, and I tap in there, and if I now select, or let's have me plug in, I'm going to type in Rocky Butte, which is a local sort of riding feature that you can do right after work. It's relatively close to the city of Portland. So now that I've selected my end location, the route planner gives me the option to route to here, and it focuses a little marker over the top of Rocky Butte. If I select route to here, and then zoom out a little bit, I now have a route that starts from my current location and goes all the way up to the top of Rocky Butte. So this is sort of a process that I can continue to rinse and repeat until I have a nice big cohesive route. You know, if I wanted to go from Rocky Butte to Mount Scott Fuel, which is where I would get, you know, cedar chips for my yard or something like that, I could type in Mount Scott Fuel, route to here, and that would sort of continue to create a route for me as I go. Last thing I'll say about this, just to sort of quickly recap, is whenever you build a route between 2 points, it defaults to the roads that are safest for cycling in that area, taking into account all of that traffic information, bike routes or bikeways, and defaulting to those accordingly, that type of thing. Yes,
Question. So, okay, so I just did that from my house to Cedar Creek.
Okay.
And thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And now how do I save this?
Yes. Okay. Sorry. I stopped my screen share too soon. Let me pull that back up. Okay. So here's my sort of quick and easy route to Rocky Butte. Now that I want to, let's say I want to finish this route because I like the way it looks. Lower right-hand corner of the screen, you see where it says finish? So tap finish. And then if you were in the field and you just want to navigate this right now, you could tap navigate, but let's save this so it appears in your route library for access later on. Tap save. You can give it a title. And tap save at the bottom of the screen.
It says, congratulations, you successfully saved your route, view route, plan new route, share route. Just nothing.
If you want to tap view route, that'll just give you an overview of the route itself. So here, I'll do the same thing for mine.
Okay.
And that just shows you the route line, gives you a little bit of information. And then I would
save it.
All that.
And then I would save that.
It sounds like it's already saved if you're seeing that option.
Okay, cool. Wow, this is awesome. Thank you very much.
No problem. So yeah, the one last thing I'll sort of say here, because I know we're getting to the end of our time, is I didn't really have a chance to go over the website for planning. All of the stuff that I've shown you exists on our website as well. Route planning on the website is a really fun, nice and easy thing to do. The reason I mention this and the reason you might consider planning on the website as opposed to the app is if you're trying to be very specific about which streets you're using and where you're sort of tapping as you go, your phone screen is relatively small, so you don't have a lot of available workspace. You might need to zoom in pretty close and tap on the roads that you specifically want to use, which can take a little bit of time just because of that small screen. Doing it on a computer, on the other hand, you have a nice big computer screen, computer monitor size. It makes planning routes in bigger, broader strokes a little bit easier and a little bit faster. And I have this really nice route planning 101 tutorial that I can include in my follow-up that shows you everything you need to know about route planning on the website. But really, long story short, if you're planning on creating routes in detail, do it on the website. Save the mobile app for when you're sort of in the field and you really, really need it right then and there.
This is great. Thank you so much, Dylan. This was really, really informative, and just, it was really good to go through it with you,
Yeah, thank you so
and
much for
just
having
learn
me.
more about it. Yeah, and I think, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be sharing this with everyone. It's a pretty big group that I'll be sharing it with, and then I'll also share it on my blog as well.
Yeah, and then I do want to open it up to see if anybody has any last minute questions. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that um, I'm happy to throw forward an offer for anybody who sees the recording or who has heard about this, who wants to give it a try. I would be more than happy to set anyone who reaches out to me with a 2-week free premium subscription, just to test out all the stuff that we have, see if it's something that they'd want to continue past that point. But yeah, as you can see, it's a pretty valuable tool for locating existing bike routes, for planning bike routes of your own. For training purposes, it works really well. So anybody who's interested can let me know and I'll be happy to help them out. And then lastly, are there any last minute questions, concerns, things that we'd like to touch on before the end of the call?
No, this was great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Interesting. So, all right, perfect. Well, I will see y'all later. And Hillary, I'll send you that email first thing tomorrow morning. And again,
Terrific.
thanks so much for having me and giving me the ability to chat with folks. And anybody has any questions, concerns, wants to take me up on that free trial, they'll have my email address so they can get in contact with me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dylan. Really, this was great.
All right, no
All right,
problem at all.
have a great night.
All right, you as well. See ya.
Bye-bye.